Mokosh, she who holds the threads, a Slavic myth. Before fate was spoken aloud, before destiny was written in words, there was Mokosh. She does not sit above the world. She does not rule from the sky. She is not thunder, and she is not flame. Mokosh is found closer to the ground, where hands touch soil, where feet grow tired, where life is shaped slowly, one motion at a time. She is the keeper of threads, not the sharp blade that cuts them. And in the quiet places of the old forest, where the air is damp and the earth remembers every footstep, it is said that Mokosh sits at her loom. She weaves not cloth but lives. Each thread is a moment. Each strand is a breath taken, without knowing what comes next. Each knot is a choice remembered, not judged, not corrected, only placed. Here nothing is rushed, nothing is wasted. Mokosh does not punish. She does not reward either. She does not pull the thread tight or let it fall loose without reason. She simply records. When people sleep, she works. When villages grow quiet and fires burn low, her loom continues its steady rhythm, a sound too soft to wake the mind, but strong enough to hold the world together. When hands spin wool or flax, they echo her labor. When fingers learn the motion of weaving, they remember something older than language. Mokosh teaches that fate is not a sudden fall, but a slow gathering. What is repeated becomes strong. What is neglected grows thin. What is pulled too hard will fray, and what is held too tightly will lose its shape. She governs patience, because patience is the shape of endurance. In old Slavic lands, Mokosh was honored not with towering temples, but with care, with clean floors, with honest work, with the steady keeping of promises that no one else could see. She was honored in the quiet dignity of daily life, in spinning and mending, in the acceptance that not all things can be hurried into being. To forget Mokosh is to forget that life is built by hands, not all at once, but again and again. She is present in the spinning wheel, in the rhythm of breath, in the slow work of becoming what one already is. She teaches that fate is not the enemy to be fought, but a pattern to be understood. When storms come, she does not shout them away. She simply waits. When sorrow comes, she does not deny it. She simply weaves it in. The thread darkens, but it does not break. And when joy appears, she does not cling. She allows it to pass through the loom, brightening the pattern for a time before settling back to memory. Mokosh reminds us that fate is not a chain, and it's not a prison. It is a fabric, strong enough to hold, soft enough to move, shaped by every motion made in silence. As night deepens, as the world grows slower, the loom does not stop. Thread by thread, moment by moment, she continues her work, not to control, not to command, but to hold. And in that holding, all things are allowed to rest. Amoki, the guardian at the threshold. When the last breath leaves the body, there is no scream, no fire, no sudden darkness. There is confusion. The world does not end, it simply loosens. The ground no longer feels solid. The sky no longer answers. Voices echo without mouths. This is the space between, and it is here that Amoki waits. She does not chase the dead. She does not summon them. She stands at the place all paths must cross, where the living world thins and the ancestral realm begins to breathe. Amoki is not hidden. She does not need to be. Those who arrive feel her before they see her. A pressure, a stillness, a certainty that movement without permission is no longer possible. She is the guardian of the threshold, the keeper of passage, the one who decides whether a soul may continue forward or must turn back. In the time before her, souls wandered. They drifted into forests. They clung to homes. They followed bloodlines without rest. The living could not sleep, and the dead could not settle. So order was required. Not punishment and not fear, but order. Amoke was appointed not to rule the dead, but to protect the boundary. She carried no weapons, because none is ever needed. Her power is not force, simply permission. She speaks few words. She does not ask who you were in life. She does not care for titles, wealth, or praise. She listens for balance. She listens for truth. For whether your spirit understands that it has ended one journey and must begin another. Those who resist, who cling to breath, to flesh, to unfinished hunger, feel the weight of her gaze. Not anger, but correction. They are guided back, returned to dreams, sent to resolve what was left undone. Now those who accept, they feel something entirely different. Relief. Their fear loosens. Their memories soften. The noise of the living world fades. Amoke opens the way. Rivers appear, paths unfold, voices of the ancestors rise, not calling, but welcoming. This is not judgment. This is transition. Amoke does not decide who is good or evil. She decides who is ready. Through her, death becomes sacred. Through her, chaos is guided, not destroyed. Through her, the worlds remain separate and whole. And every soul, whether king or child, must one day stand before her. Not to beg, not to fight, but to listen. Because when Amoke steps aside, the ancestors are waiting. And when she does not, it is because the story is not yet finished. Njord, Lord of the Quiet Sea. Not a god of thunder, not a god of war, not a god of apocalypse. Njord is a god you feel before you see. He arrives with the wind, not violent wind, the kind that fills sails, the kind that turns a stranded ship into motion, the kind that whispers, go. Njord is a god of the sea, but not the raging sea. He governs the open waters that allow passage. He governs trade routes, safe return, maritime wealth. He is the breath inside the Viking world. Without wind, there is no raids. Without ships, there is no empire. Without safe harbor, there is no survival. Njord is not conquest, he is circulation. He belongs to the Vanir, the older gods of fertility and abundance. Before the warrior gods dominated Norse myth, the Vanir ruled cycles, growth, prosperity. When Aesir and Vanir went to war, the conflict did not end in annihilation. It ended in exchange. Njord was sent to live among the Aesir as a peace hostage. Let's think about this. The god of wealth and wind becomes the bridge between divine families. He was not conquered, he was integrated. And from that moment forward, even the war gods depended on him. Njord is also father of two of the most powerful deities in Norse cosmology, Freyr and Freya. Freyr governs harvest, kingship, and peace. Freya governs love, desire, magic, and even claims half of the honored dead. Njord is the root of the prosperity line. He is the quiet patriarch and the fertility power. He is the most human story in his marriage. Njord marries Skandi, the goddess of winter. She loves the mountains. He loves the sea. They try to compromise. 9 nights by the ocean, 9 nights in the mountains. In the mountains, Njord cannot sleep. The wolves howl. The air is too sharp. But by the sea, Scandi cannot rest. The gulls scream. The waves never stop moving. They part ways, not from hatred, but from elemental incompatibility. Sea and stone, tide and frost. Njord is movement, Scandi is stillness, and stillness cannot hold the tide. Symbolically, Njord represents something rare in Norse mythology: stability without stagnation, prosperity without plunder, movement without chaos. He is not the storm, he is the space between storms. He is a god of flow, and flow is power, and he stands at the edge of Njord at sunrise. Long ships behind him, salt winds lifting silver hair, no lightning, no roar, just tide moving in and out. Njord does not command the sea, he understands it. And in that world obsessed with battle, the quiet sea outlasts the storm. Odin and the eye that would not look away. Now, before the end of all things had a name, before the gods spoke openly about Ragnarök, there was an unease that followed Odin like a shadow. Not fear. Fear implies ignorance. This was something much worse. This was suspicion. Now, Odin ruled as king of the Aesir, seated high in Asgard on the throne, surrounded by warriors, by gods, and by poets who praised his name. But praise rang hollow to him, because Odin knew a truth few dared to admit. A throne does not grant understanding. Power does not grant clarity, and gods, like men, can rule blindly. At night, when the halls grew quiet, Odin would sit in his throne. Hugin and Munin, thought and memories, his crows would return from their flights. They would perch on his shoulders and whisper what they had seen in the 9 realms. Wars brewing, oaths breaking, fates tightening like knots, and each whisper confirmed what Odin already suspected, that something was coming, and worse, that it was already in motion. So Odin turned his attention not outward, but downward, to the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose branches held the heavens, and whose roots drank from the places that even gods avoided. One root fed Mimir's well, a well not of water alone, but of memory, of truth, of things remembered by the world itself. It was said that the well remembered every mistake ever made, and every consequence yet to come. And it was guarded by Mimir, not a warrior, not a tyrant, but a keeper, because wisdom does not need force, only patience. Odin traveled alone, no army, no banners, no ceremony, a king who feared witness. When he reached the well, he did not admire it, he did not marvel, he already knew what it was. He asked for a drink. Mimir looked at him, not with reverence, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting. And the price was spoken plainly. One of your eyes. Not your blood, not your crown, not your life. Your eye, the thing with which you interpret the world. And the silence that followed was heavy, because Odin understood the meaning immediately. This was not payment for knowledge, this was proof of intent. To drink from the well was to accept that you would never see the world the same way again. And Odin could have turned back. He would still be king, he would still be worshipped, he would still be feared. Ignorance would have protected him. But Odin did not come for comfort, he came for truth. And truth always takes something with it. So Odin reached up and tore the eye from its socket. No miracle softened the act, no divine numbness dulled the pain. This was not a test. It was mutilation, a god breaking himself on purpose. Blood fell into the well, followed by the eye itself, which sank slowly as if the well were swallowing a memory. Only then did Mimir allow him to drink. And what Odin gained was not peace. He saw the ruins, not the symbols, but as forces that demanded sacrifice to weld. He saw fate not as a suggestion, but as a structure that was already built. He saw Ragnarök not as a distant threat, but as a certainty moving steadily towards him. And worst of all, he understood that knowledge does not grant control. It only removes denial. When Odin rose from the well, he was one-eyed, not wounded, not diminished, but exposed. From that day forward, Odin would never rest. He wandered the realms disguised as an old man, testing warriors, tempting kings, destroying those who proved unworthy. Not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. Because Odin knew something that the others did not, that war was coming whether they wanted it or not. Valhalla was not a reward, it was a recruitment center. In Herja were not heroes, they were resources. And Odin gathered them obsessively, because wisdom had shown him the end but offered no way out of it. This was the price of Odin paid, not the loss of time, but the loss of illusion. He could see the truth now, and it did not care that he was God. His missing eye did not make him wiser, not the way that poets are bad. It made him haunted, because once you see the shape of fate, you can't argue it. You cannot pray it away, you cannot rule it into submission. You can only prepare. And so Odin ruled with authority in one hand and inevitability in the other. One eye looking forward, one eye forever staring up from the depths of the well. A reminder to gods and men alike that wisdom is not enlightenment, it is ignorance. And knowledge is not saving, it only ensures that when it comes, you will recognize what you saw. Long ago, when the North forgot how to sleep, the winter arrived quietly. Not the clean snow of stars, but a tired chill, heavy, lingering, very unsettled. Rivers froze in the wrong directions, shadows stayed longer than they should, and fear, left unattended, learned how to walk. But the heavens noticed. They debated, they hesitated. But in the far north, where night is patient, Paktai stood barefoot on the frozen ground. He did not rush, he did not shout. For many winters, Paktai had only done one thing. He had mastered himself. Each breath slowed with the storm within. Each silence sharpened his will. What no longer belonged to him, fear, doubt, hunger for power, fell away and wandered the world, believing itself free. Tonight, Paktai opened his eyes. From the quiet sky descended the ancient companions, the turtle, slow and enduring, and the snake, precise and final. They did not coil and threat. They rested. Paktai took up his sword, not in anger, but in clarity, and walked into the shadow beneath the frozen rivers, where restless things had built a kingdom of noise. The darkness expected struggle. It expected fear. Instead, it met stillness. Each step Paktai took returned something to the balance. Each strike unraveled what should have never been. No screams, no chaos, only correction. When the last shadow dissolved, Paktai placed his sword into the earth. The rivers remembered how to flow. The cold softened into winter, not warning, and the north exhaled. From that night on, Paktai was known as Zen Wu, the true warrior, not because he conquered others, but because he never needed to. They say he still walks when the earth grows loud with corruption, not to punish, not to terrify, but to remind things where they belong. And when he passes, even evil finds itself too tired to continue. Rest now. The north is watching, and tonight it is calm. Pakhet, the hunter of the desert, the lioness of the cliffs. There are gods that live in temples with crowds and incense and choirs. And then there are gods who live where human voices don't carry. Pakhet is not a goddess of the marketplace. She is not a goddess of polite prayer. Pakhet is a lion goddess in the margins, the heat haze between dunes, the shadow tucked under cliff, the quiet tension in the spine that tells a hunter something is watching you back. Some deities come from stories. Pakhet comes from presence, and presence is older than any story ever written down. She is known as she who scratches, she who rips, or she who hunts. And she belongs in the edge of Kemet, the place where the Nile can't soften. You can see her in the wide desert bowl under the sun, bleached pale blue, almost white. The sun is so blunt, it doesn't feel like light, it feels like weight. The sand isn't one color. It is layered, gold, amber, clay red, bone dust. And there are stone outcroppings like broken teeth. Cliff faces that look carved by time and sandstone, and old arguments between wind and rock. And somewhere in that cliff wall, cut into the stone itself, there is a place for her. A hollow that is not a cave, not a home, not a tomb. A mouth in the rock where a lion goddess can be fed with offerings and fear and respect. Pakhet is a cliff goddess, a goddess you approach the way you approach a lion. Not loud, not fast, not careless. Because if she is present, the desert becomes a hunting ground. Pakhet is often associated as being a lioness. Now don't imagine an animal, imagine a divinity wearing animal truth. She is tall in the way that statues are tall, not in height but in authority, the kind of authority that makes the air feel organized around her. Her face is a lioness, clean, calm eyes, a muzzle that suggests restraint, not the grin of a predator playing with prey, more like the stillness of a predator that doesn't need to prove anything. Her skin is a shade of sun-burnished bronze or deep umber, like the earth after heat. Not polished, not porcelain, more like living stone warmed by the daylight. Gold catches her cuffs, collar, the geometry of ancient craft. But this isn't decoration, it reads as rank. And her eyes, they are measuring instruments. They measure distance, they measure threat, they measure truth. When she turns her gaze on someone, it doesn't feel like being looked at. It feels like being judged by the wild itself. Pakhet is a lion goddess tied to hunting and war, but not in the loud, marching drums way. Her war is precision. Her hunting is law. She is the goddess of the moment before impact, the silence before claws, the breath held, the twitch of muscle under skin. If Sekhmet is the blaze, Pakhet is the ember that waits. If Bastet is the hearth cat, the domestic guardian, Pakhet is the wildcat that never belonged in your home in the first place. Pakhet moves between those polarities like a blade sliding between ribs, soft and inevitable. She is the lioness outside the city order, the divine reminder that civilization is a thin robe worn over the animal truth. She is the goddess who hunts at twilight. Pakhet is strongest in the hours that don't belong to anyone. Not to noon. Noon is too obvious. Not to midnight. Midnight is too deep. Pakhet belongs to twilight, where the desert stops shining and starts listening. At that hour, the horizon bruises purple and burnt orange. The sand cools fast. The air changes texture, like silk turning into smoke. You can imagine her then, a silhouette near the cliff edge, a goddess shaped like a lioness, gold catching the last light like fireflies trapped in metal. Her feet silent on stone, not running, not sneaking, but existing with the confidence of a creature that has never been prey. This is the Pakhet myth, the lioness who teaches the world what it feels like to be hunted by the sacred. Pakhet's worship is associated with places like Ben Hassan, cliffside zones where tombs and sanctuaries cut in the rock made from the landscape to feel like a library for the dead. And that matters, because a cliff temple isn't a normal temple. A temple in a city says the gods are here with you. A temple in a cliff says the gods are here, you just happen to be allowed near them. The rock is older than your lineage. The desert doesn't care about your name. And the goddess of the cliff is the same way. She is not impressed, she is not bribed, she's not moved by performance. Approaching Paket is like approaching the ancient truth. You don't negotiate, you align or you get corrected. Paket's energy is quiet dominance. She is not screaming wrath, she is not chaos. She is controlled force, the kind of force that doesn't waste motion, the kind of force that doesn't argue. In mythic reading, Paket shows up in a person's life when someone needs to stop begging and start moving with authority. Someone is surrounded by predators and has to become one. Someone is learning that softness without boundaries becomes a meal. Paket doesn't teach to be cruel, she teaches to be real. She teaches the law of the hunt, which is not evil, it is honest. The desert doesn't apologize for being dry. The lioness doesn't apologize for eating. Paket is that level of truth. The truth that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't care how anyone feels about it. Her name is often connected to scratching, and this is the perfect symbolism. A scratch isn't always lethal. A scratch is a message. A scratch says, I could have ended you. I chose education. Paket's scratch is initiation. It marks a person. It can be literal, claws, blood, pain, or spiritual, ego cut, illusions torn, comfort shredded. Paket doesn't just kill prey, she kills falsehood. And if someone is living in a lie, Paket is not the goddess that gently guides them out of it. She is the goddess that rips away the curtain. Paket in the lioness continuum. It had multiple lion-headed goddesses because lion energy had multiple modes. Paket is not redundant. She is specialized. She is the lioness of the cliffs and the borderlands, hunting as sacred law, controlled violence, twilight vigilance, the wild feminine that doesn't seek approval. If Sekhmet is divine punishment, Paket is divine pursuit. And pursuit is scarier. Punishment ends. Pursuit keeps coming. Poseidon, the earth shaker, the ocean king, the power beneath the waves. Now, back when there was only blackness as far as the eye could see, there was the sea. When time itself was just beginning to awaken, there was the sea. And beneath that, there was him. Poseidon was never gentle water. He is pressure, depth, impact, the force that reminds humanity that it does not own the world. Birth of a god. He is born to Kronos and Rhea, children of the Titans, heir to a brutal cosmic dynasty. Like his siblings, he was swallowed by Kronos, imprisoned in darkness, silenced before he could even speak. But fate cracks open the tyrant. Freed by his brother Zeus, Poseidon joins the rebellion, the Titanomachy, a war not of armies, but of existence itself. When the Titans fall, the cosmos is divided. Zeus claims the sky. Hades takes the underworld. Poseidon draws the sea. Not as consolation prize, as a kingdom. The dominion of the deep. The Greeks do not see the ocean as peaceful. They saw it as unpredictable, generous one day, devouring the next. Poseidon commands the storm surge, the tidal fury, drowning silence, and the trembling of the earth itself. He is called Earth Shaker. When the ground splits beneath cities, that is not geology. That is a god striking the floor of reality with his trident. He creates horses from sea foam, wild, muscular, unstoppable creatures. Even his gifts are force incarnate. The contest for Athens. Power must be tested. When the city of Athens seeks a patron, Poseidon answers, and so does Athena. Poseidon strikes the rock of Acropolis with his trident. A spring bursts forth. Power, salt, sea strength. Athena plants an olive tree. Sustainability, civilization, strategy. The city chooses her, and Poseidon does not forget. The ocean around Greece never lets them forget either. The Trojan War. During the war at Troy, Poseidon does not sit neutral. He sides with the Trojans. He stirs waves to protect Greek fleets. He shakes battlefields. He reminds mortals that gods are not mascots. They are forces. Even the might of the heroes bends when he intervenes. Wrath against Odysseus. But his most personal fury is reserved for one man. Odysseus blinds his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. The sea becomes a prison. For 10 years Poseidon hunts him. Storm after storm, shipwreck after shipwreck, island after island. Not random misfortune, divine pursuit. Poseidon does not rage quickly. He endures, and so does his anger. He represents civilization's dependence on nature, the illusion of control, the power beneath structure, the reminder that stability rests on something wild. He is not evil, he is elemental. The Mediterranean did not belong to Greece. Greece survived because Poseidon allowed it. When ships vanish, when coastal lines tremble, when the seas roar without warning, the Greeks do not blame chance. They look to the horizon, and they see a king beneath the waves, and his trident is never far from the surface. Bringer of breath, civilizer of worlds. Now the wind does not announce itself. It moves first, unseen, shaping what follows. Across the ancient lands of Mesoamerica, there existed a presence whose power was not measured by conquest, but by continuity. A force that did not rule through terror, but through order. An intelligence that shaped civilizations without demanding their submission. They call this presence Quetzalcoatl, known as the feathered serpent. A being where sky and earth converge in one. Where motion is governed by restraint. Where creation begins not with command, but with breath. He was not worshipped as a tyrant. He was remembered as a guide. Now, Quetzalcoatl was never a single image, nor a single role. He moved through cultures and centuries under many names, each reflecting a function rather than a disguise. As Quetzalcoatl, he was the feathered serpent, the union of earthbound life and celestial motion. Feathers representing the sky, scales representing the ground, neither being dominant, both being necessary. As Echidna, he was the wind itself, invisible, essential, life-giving. the breath that animates the world, clears stagnation, and carries sacred speech from one age to the next. Among the Maya, he was remembered as Kukulkan, an echo rather than imitation, proof that his influence traveled farther than borders and endured longer than empires. These were not separate gods. These were aspects of the same civilizing force. His role as the civilizer. Quetzalcoatl did not create humanity to rule it. He prepared humanity to survive. He is credited with bringing maize from the mountains where it is hidden and transforming this sustenance into civilization. He established calendars so time itself could be measured, remembered, and anticipated. He gave humanity sacred speech, language not only for command, but for teaching, for prayer, and for recording. As Ihikatl, the wind, he moved the sun across the sky so the world would not stagnate in darkness. Breath, motion, rhythm. These were his domains. Where other gods demanded sacrifice to prove loyalty, Quetzalcoatl emphasized balance. Order was not enforced, it was simply taught. The descent into Mexiclan. When the world stood empty of humanity, Quetzalcoatl descended into Mexiclan, the realm of the dead, where the remains of previous ages lay guarded by these lords of death. Now these bones were not relics, they were potentials, and the rulers of Mexiclan did not yield them willingly. They tested Quetzalcoatl with impossible trials, attempting to entrap him in his failure. And in the struggle, he stumbled, and the bones shattered. Creation itself, it seemed to have failed again. But Quetzalcoatl did not retreat. He gathered the broken remains and spilled his own divine blood upon them. From sacrifice, not dominance, humanity emerged. Imperfect, fragile, and varied. Human beings were not forged as flawless instruments. They were born of loss and intention. And this imperfection was not a flaw, it was the point. The Age of Order. In later ages, Quetzalcoatl walked among humanity as ruler priest, remembered as Tolpicin Quetzalcoatl, presiding over the city of Tula. His rule was defined not by expansion, but by refinement. Human sacrifice was rejected, arts and learning flourished, craftsmanship, astronomy, and ritual knowledge became the foundations of society. Under this guidance, civilization advanced without descending into cruelty, and this was rare, and rarity often brings attention. Where Quetzalcoatl represented restraint and continuity, Tezcatlipoca embodied conflict, reflection, and disruption. He did not confront Quetzalcoatl with armies, he confronted him with a mirror. And in that mirror, Quetzalcoatl saw not a god, but a flawed being, aging, mortal, capable of error. Temptation followed, sacred boundaries blurred. The myth does not dwell on indulgence, it dwells on consequence. Quetzalcoatl recognized that he had fallen short of his own principles, and instead of doubling down on authority, he chose removal. Exile and transformation. Quetzalcoatl did not cling to power, he left. Some traditions say he walked eastward towards the sea. Others say he burned himself on a pyre. The details differ, but the meaning remains constant. He refused to rule dishonestly. Shiva, the one who sits still. Before the worlds learned how to move, before time learned how to count itself, there was Shiva, not as a destroyer, but as the one who did not move. Shiva sits at the edge of creation, high upon the mountain, where the air is thin and the mind grows quiet. He does not rule by command. He does not speak unless spoken to. He closes his eyes, and in that closing, the universe itself exhales. Around him, galaxies turn. Stars are born and burn out. Seasons rise and fall like breath. Yet Shiva remains unmoving. His stillness deeper than that motion. His silence louder than sound. The snakes that coil around his body do not strike, they rest. The ash upon his skin is not death, but the reminder that all things return to quiet. Shiva is the god of meditation, because meditation is not escape, it is witnessing. He watches the universe dance without joining the dance. He allows desire, fear, and time to pass in front of him, like clouds crossing the sky. And because he does not cling, nothing binds him. It is said that when Shiva opens his eyes, all creation trembles. But when he keeps them closed, the creation itself learns how to breathe. In his stillness, the restless will find rest. In his silence, the loud learn how to listen. Shiva teaches without teaching, by showing that nothing needs to be forced, that even gods may sit quietly and let the world unfold on its own. And so he remains, not rushing the end, not pulling the beginning closer, but holding the space between moments, where all things are allowed to be. If the universe feels loud, Shiva sits. If the mind feels crowded, Shiva sits. And in that sitting, the night remembers how to stay calm. The daughters of Mara, the final trial for the Buddha as he sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Now, these three daughters all worked in the domains of seduction, disruption, and emotional manipulation. And their most famous target was, of course, Siddhartha Gautama. Their mission was tied to their father's force. He had already tried storms, demons, armies of fear, and none of them had moved him. So he sent something that was far more precise, and these were his daughters. Because no warrior is undefeated until he has defeated himself. Now he sent first Tanha, who was thirst. And she was not aggressive, she was not loud. She becomes everything Siddhartha ever loved. She is comfort, memory, the warmth of the palace that he had left behind. She reminds him of what it is to have pleasure without shame. She whispers of reunion. She offers relief from the severity of awakening. And her weapon is longing. But the Siddhartha Buddha does not react to this. He watches the feeling rise and pass, and Tanha fades away. And then there is Raga, who is the flame. And Raga does not whisper, she burns. She dances before him with this radiant beauty. She shifts form. She is youthful, divine, cosmic. She magnifies sensation. She tries to awaken not memory, but hunger. She is passion without restraint. She is attachment disguised as devotion. But Siddhartha sees the chain hidden inside of her embrace. He does not recoil. He does not engage. He remains still. And Raga cannot bind what does not grasp. So she dissolves. Then comes Arati, who is discontent. And she does not seduce. She mocks. What are you doing here? This is pointless. You are wasting your life. She attacks discipline itself. She sends boredom, restlessness, irritation, doubt. The quiet voice that sabotages commitment. But Siddhartha does not argue with her. He does not defend himself. He remains still. And without reaction, Arati has no fuel. And she disappears. When all the three fail, their father demands proof of witness, and Siddhartha touches the earth, and the ground itself bears witness. And at that moment, Mara and his daughters lose their hold, not because they are destroyed, but because they are all understood. The descent into Metlakon. The world had ended more than once, not as a metaphor, not as poetic exaggerations. Ages really had risen and fallen, whole civilizations wiped away, the very structure of reality reset. Like the games the gods keep replaying and never quite getting right. One age drowned in water, another burned in celestial fire, another collapsed under its own violence and greed, until the sky itself seemed tired of watching. Each age left something behind. Ruins sank, names vanishes, languages broke apart into sounds that no one remembered how to use. But there was one thing that did not disappear: the bones. They fell through time like stones dropping into deep water, settling in the lowest regions of existence, in places where memory did not soften, and endings did not apologize. This place was Metlakon. Metlakon was not fire and pitchforks. It was something colder. This was a world without sunlight, without birds, without the small accidental beauties that distract the living. There were mountains here that did not care if you climbed them, winds that cut like obsidian blades, and rivers that flowed only to separate, not to nourish. At the very bottom of those 9 layers of difficulty and forgetting, the bones of previous humanities rested, guarded by the Lord and Lady of Death, who were less monsters and more like the clerks of cosmic archives. Above, the gods argued. Some said, "Let the world sleep. The earth is quiet now, and this is good." Others said, "Build a new humanity, but this time make them obedient. No questions, no rebellions, no mistakes." Quetzalcoatl listened. He was the feathered serpent, a god of wind, learning, and ordered motion. He knew what silence meant. Silence after music can be beautiful. Silence after a scream can be relief. But this silence was not earned. It was just empty. A world without people, he said finally, is not balance. It is neglect. The other gods turned toward him. "So what would you propose?" one asked, not kindly. "If there is to be a new humanity," Quetzalcoatl answered, "it should not be made from nothing, as if nothing ever happened. It should be born from what already was, from the bones of those who lived before." Now this suggestion made some gods uncomfortable, because bones meant history. Bones meant continuity. Bones meant that actions had consequences that outlived empires. "Then go," the other said. "Attest disguised as consent. If you believe this so strongly, you go down to Metlakon and bring those bones back yourself." Now Quetzalcoatl did not posture. He did not summon armies or craft a speech about destiny. He simply agreed. And then he descended. Now the path to Metlakon is not a door you open. It is a series of places where things are taken from you, until all you have left is what you really are. Quetzalcoatl's first steps took him through a region of collapsing mountains, where stone itself moved against travelers. Peaks leaned and fell without warning, forcing him to move not with brute speed, but with anticipation and timing. The god of measured wind understood timing. He breathed, watched, and moved through the shifting stone like a serpent through tall grass. And then came the winds. Not gentle breezes. Winds made of blades. They cut at him as he moved. But the god of air did not fight wind with force. He changed the currents, redirecting some, absorbing others, letting them carve away what he did not need to carry deeper. He passed through regions of darkness so thick it felt like walking through ink. Regions where the cries of the dead sounded like echoes under ice. Regions where distance lied. Step forward took you sideways instead. But he did not rush. Motion is not only speed, but it is also intention. Piece by piece, burden by burden, he came to the lowest level, to the heart of Metzlikon. There, amid plains of ash and scattered bone, stood the Lord and Lady of Death. They were not dripping with gore. They did not wave arms dramatically. They watched him with the steady patience of beings who have seen every living thing arrive eventually. "Why have you come here, Quetzalcoatl?" the Lord of Death asked. His voice did not roar. It weighed. "I have come for the bones," Quetzalcoatl said. "To decorate your temples?" the lady asked. "No." "To build an army that cannot die?" the Lord asked. "No." "Then why?" they said together. Quetzalcoatl answered without pause, "So that a new humanity can rise, not from empty command, but from memory. They will be born of what already lived and ended. They will carry that inside them, even though they do not know." The Lord and Lady of Death exchanged a look that mortals would have missed. It was not anger, it was calculations. "You may have the bones," the Lord said, "if you can take them. But nothing in Mictland is simply given. This realm does not exist to please the living or the gods. If you want them, you will face our trials." Quetzalcoatl nodded once, then let them begin. The first was a trial of direction. The Lord of Death instructed Quetzalcoatl, "Take these bones and circle Metzlikon 4 times. Return to this place, carrying them all." Now they gave him no map. The plains ahead looked identical, fields of bone fragments and dust, low hills that shifted as if they were breathing. Quetzalcoatl gathered the bones as carefully as he could, bundling femurs, ribs, jawbones, pieces of skull that once housed thoughts and dreams. He carried them in his arms and moved forward. With each step, the land changed. What had been flat became broken. What had been open became choked with jagged stone. He walked until the landscape itself seemed offended by his persistence. A lesser being would have relied on sight. Quetzalcoatl trusted something else. He listened to the patterns of the wind. Even here in the land of the dead. He noted the way the ash moved, the way sound echoed from distant rock. He let those things guide him, subtle markers in a place designed to erase direction. 1 circle, 2 circles, 3 circles, and on the 4th, the ground began to tilt, as if the realm itself were trying to shrug him off. Ridges rose under his feet, gaps opened suddenly. He stumbled, nearly dropping the bones. He tightened his grip and kept moving, not fast, but steady, until he came once again to the place where the Lord and the Lady waited. "You have completed the trial," they said, and they did not sound pleased, but they did not object. Now the second trial was that of sound. The Lady of Death handed him a conch shell. It was smooth, heavy, and completely sealed. "Blow this as a trumpet," she said, "so that all Metzlikon hears your call." Quetzalcoatl turned the shell over in his hand. It had no holes, no mouth for breath to enter. A trick then, he understood. The kind that relies on reflex, that a god, insulted by impossibility, will lash out, shout back, storm away, or break the object in anger. Quetzalcoatl did none of these things. He placed the shell on the ground. He called the smallest beings of the underworld to him, and worms emerged from the soil, thin bodies slicing over stone. "Open a path," he told them. They bore into this shell, carving tunnels through its inner spirals. Then he called bees, high, bright spirits of the surface world, who still answered his wind-born summons. "Fill it with breath," he told them. They flew into the shell's new tunnels, their wings turning the hollow space into a living instrument. Quetzalcoatl lifted the conch to his lips and blew. The sound that emerged was low and vast, a tone that seemed to roll through Mictland's bones as much as through the air. For a moment, the dead heard something that did not belong in their realm. the wave of memories, the sweep of air across open land, the echo of a world above. The Lord and Lady of Death glanced at each other again. "You have completed the second trial," they said. Their voices held no warmth. The third trial looked simple. "Carry the bones out of Mexican," the Lord said. "Take them to your living world, if you can, and we will not stop you." He said it kindly, but that was a warning. Quetzalcoatl gathered the bones again, this time aware of how fragile his mission truly was. These were not stones that he could simply replace if dropped. These were the remains of ages. He began the journey upward. The paths were no easier in reverse. The wind still cut, the mountains still moved, but now a new difficulty joined them: other hands. As he climbed, unseen forces jostled him. The ground beneath his feet shifted more violently, not like the natural tremors, but like the hand shaking a table for the pleasure of watching things fall. Birds with obsidian beaks, agents of the underworld, some say, swooped down, pecking at the bones, trying to knock them free. At a narrow ledge above the dark ravine, the assault became too much. One hand struck his arm, one slip, a misjudged step, and Quetzalcoatl stumbled. The bundle of bones spilled from his grasp, clattering across the stone, hell across the roof. Some remained close, others shattered as they hit the ground, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, rolling into cracks, falling into the ravine below. It was not a clean drop. This was chaos, clattering loss. The sound echoed through Metzlican. The Lord and Lady of Death listened. "Look," they said, "the bones are broken. Humanity cannot be restored. Our records remain intact, but you have failed." Now, in many myths, this is where a god would rage, where the story would become a battle. Quetzalcoatl did not draw a weapon. He knelt. He moved slowly, carefully, collecting what fragments he could reach. Whole bones, half bones, pieces too small to name. His hands shook, not with fear of punishment, but with the weight of what he was trying to hold together. He could not get them all. There would be gaps, missing pieces, parts of former humans lost forever. And he knew what that meant. This humanity would not be perfect. It could not be. And still, he did not stop. When he gathered all that he could, Quetzalcoatl did something that changed more than one world. He wounded himself. He drew a sharp shard of bone across his own skin and let his blood fall into the pile. Now, divine blood, rich with memory and intent, mixed with the broken fragments of ancient lives. He did not sprinkle a ceremonial drop and step away. He bled. The bones drank the blood like dry earth drinks rain. And something moved. Not a god's command, not a clean act of creation that snaps reality from nothing. This was something slower. It was messier, and it was real. Forms began to knit together, not as copies of single perfect design, but as a collage of what was available. It was tall and short, strong and fragile, bodies that would age and tire and break. The Lord and Lady of Death watched, surprised despite themselves. "You would do this?" they asked. "Create a world of beings assembled from broken parts, held together by your own sacrifice?" "Yes," Quetzalcoatl said. "Why?" they pressed. "Because perfection does not endure," he answered. "We've all seen that. But something born from loss understands, even when it does not remember, that life is not guaranteed, and that is what makes it precious." Now, in some tellings, the Lords of Death protest. In others, they simply fall silent. But in all of them, the result is the same. Humanity is reborn again. Quetzalcoatl carried the bones, now living, now potential, back through the layers of Metzlican, through cutting winds and shifting stone, through corridors where echoes tried to convince him to turn back. He emerged into the world above, into air that did not burn his lungs, into light that did not feel like interrogation. He scattered maize over the ground and taught the humans how to coax food from the soil. He taught them how to mark time so they could remember when the rains would come and when the cold would return. He taught them how to speak, not only to ask and demand, but to pray, to recall, to sing. He did not make them worship him. He did not claim them as property. His blood was already in them, and there was no need to brand them from outside. This is why in these stories, human beings are not invincible, not flawless, and not eternally obedient. They are born from broken bones and a God's voluntary wound. We crack, we forget, we hurt each other, we love anyway. We are not the triumph of divine planning. We are the result of a God who failed the ritual of perfection, refused to accept the failure as the end, and chose to bleed rather than abandon the attempt. That is what distinguishes Quetzalcoatl from gods who only know how to rule with fear. He did not storm Mexican to seize a prize. He descended, was tested, fell, and still continued. He did not stand above humanity and issue commands. He knelt among broken bones and gave something of himself so that other people could exist. And when his work was done, he did not stay to sit on a throne over us. He became the wind that moves the unseen, the breath between worlds, the quiet force that nudges seeds to sprout, and the clouds to cross a waiting sky. The descent into Mitchland is not just a story about a god going down and coming back up. It is the record of what we were made of: failure, sacrifice, memory, and the stubborn refusal to leave the world empty. The myth of Arachne. Arachne is born in the land of Lydia, the daughter of a humble dyer of wool. She does not come from nobility. She is not taught by priests or temples. But what she has is skill. From a young age, her hands move with quiet certainty. Threads bend to her will, colors settle into patterns no one has ever seen before. Her weaving is not merely decorative, it's alive with detail, balance, and precision. People travel from distant towns just to watch her work. At first, they say her talent must be a gift from the goddess Athena, who is the patron of wisdom and weaving. But over time, as Arachne's reputation grows, people begin to speak differently about her. They say her skill does not resemble a gift. They say it surpasses the goddess herself. Arachne hears the rumors and does not deny them. She says plainly that she owes Athena nothing. She says if the goddess wishes to test her, she is welcome to do so. And Athena hears this. She comes to Arachne not in glory, but disguised as an old woman, leaning heavily on an old weathered staff. Her voice is calm, almost kind. She warns Arachne to show humility, to respect the gods, to withdraw her challenge. But Arachne refuses. She says skill should stand on its own. She says truth does not bow to authority. And then in that moment, the disguise falls away. Athena reveals herself, radiant and severe, and the true contest now begins. Two looms are set side by side. Athena weaves first. Her tapestry is perfect in structure and form. It shows the gods in all their splendor, majestic, orderly, unchallenged. Mortals who defy them are punished. And the message is clear. Power rules, and rebellion leads only to ruin. And then Arachne weaves. Her hands move swiftly, confidently, without any hesitation. And her tapestry tells a different story. She shows the gods as they truly behave. Zeus disguising himself to deceive mortal women. Gods abusing power, betraying trust, breaking the very rules they demand others obey. There is no distortion in this, no exaggeration, only accuracy. When the tapestries are finished, the difference is unmistakable. Athena's work is truly flawless, but Arachne's is flawless as well. But Arachne's tells a truth that Athena cannot tolerate. The goddess inspects the weaving closely, looking for an error, but of course she would find none. And in that moment, Athena understands that she is not lost because of weakness, but because of honesty. Enraged, she tears Arachne's tapestry apart. She strikes the girl, destroying the work that exposed the gods. In despair, Arachne collapses. In some tellings, she attempts to end her life, unable to bear the loss of her art and her dignity. But Athena would stop her, not out of mercy, but to deliver judgment. She transforms Arachne into a spider. Her body shrinks, her limbs twist, her fingers become legs, her loom becomes instinct. And finally, the goddess speaks again, in her true form. Arachne will weave forever, but she will never again be praised. Her work will be hidden in corners and shadows. Her name will be remembered, but her voice will be gone. And so the spider weaves, thread after thread, pattern after pattern, silent, persistent, unacknowledged. The gods retain their authority, and the truth remains, but small, overlooked, and easy to dismiss. And the world moves on. The myth of Asar, death as continuity. Asar does not rule the dead because he died. He rules because he stayed in the underworld. In the Kemetic belief system, death is not an end state. It is a process transition. Asar is not a god who escaped death. He is the god who accepted its role and made it functional. He does not return to rule the living. He does not seek his throne back. He does not even seek to avenge himself. Instead, he becomes the access that allows life to continue without him. When Set murders Asar, it's not just fratricide, it is a disruption. Order is broken, not by chaos alone, but also by the removal of continuity. Aset does not resurrect Asar to reclaim his crown. She restores him enough to anchor the system. Asar now becomes something new, not just a king of Kemet, not a ruler of men, but a ruler of after. And this is not defeat, this is cosmic specialization. He is the first god to stay dead. Many gods die. Asar is the first to understand that staying dead matters. He does not haunt the living. He does not walk the earth in disguise. He does not demand worship through fear. He sits in the duat, presiding over judgment, not as punishment, but as measurement. The heart is weighed, not for sin, but for balance. Death becomes a gate, not a wall. In Asarian beliefs, death is not exile. It is simply relocation. You are not erased, you are not trapped, you are not rewarded for conquest. You are assessed for alignment. Asar does not ask what you owned. He does not care what you conquered. He asks whether you lived your life in harmony with Ma'at. Continuity requires balance, not greatness. And this is why Asar is dangerous to empires. Empires require fear of death to function. Asar removes that leverage. If death is not annihilation, if it is not punishment, if it is not chaos, then rulers lose their greatest threat. Asar makes people harder to control. Now, Horus becomes the future, but his father Asar is the foundation. Horus avenges. Horus fights. Horus rules the living world. Asar does none of that. He assures that when Horus fails, when dynasties fall, when names are forgotten, existence itself does not collapse. Hades processes the dead. Hela houses him. Asar connects him. He is not the god of resurrection fantasies. He is the god of systems that survive loss. Death does not end in the Kemetic thought. It guarantees that life can begin again, without pretending that nothing was lost. Pele, goddess of fire, creation, and jealousy. Before the islands had names, before stone remembered the shape of mountains, before land dared to rise above the sea, there was only movement. The ocean whirled endlessly, dark and conscious, and within it traveled a force that refused stillness. Her name was Pele. She was not born in one place. She emerged again and again, from flame, from hunger, from the deep furnace of the world. Pele was fire with intention. Her hair flowed like smoke caught in the wind, black and endless, carrying embers in its wake. Her skin glowed as if lit from within, sometimes warm as sunlit stone, sometimes red hot with fury. Her eyes were not gentle. They burned with the knowing of something older than fear. Where Pele walked, the earth opened. She carried fire not as destruction, but as becoming. Lava spilled from her footsteps, slow and unstoppable, reshaping the world without apology. The sea hissed when she approached, retreating from her heat, recoiling from her will. But Pele was not alone in the world. Beneath the waves, where light dies and pressure rules, dwelled her sister, Namaka. Namaka was the ocean given thought. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on black water. Her hair moved as currents move, slow, heavy, inexorable. Her eyes were deep, ancient, and cold with memory as only the sea could have. Where Pele burned with emotion, Namaka endured with patience. She ruled the deep places, the trenches, the crushing silence, where nothing escapes gravity or consequence. And she resented her sister. When Pele arrived, the sea was pushed back. Where fire rose, water was displaced. Each new land Pele created was a wound in Namaka's domain. To Namaka, Pele was reckless, too loud, too hungry, too disruptive. To Pele, Namaka was suffocating, a force that drowned passion, swallowed movement, and demanded stillness. They were not enemies born of hatred. They were sisters born of opposition. Fire that must move, water that must contain. When Pele first settled, she believed she could build a home. She dug into the earth, carving chambers for her flame, shaping mountains from molten stone. She believed the land would hold her. But Namaka would not allow it. With crashing waves and rising tides, Namaka answered. She flooded Pele's home, cooled her lava, shattered her growing islands, and dragged them back into the sea. Storms followed Pele wherever she lingered too long. Island after island, Pele was driven away. Each retreat hardened her. Each loss sharpened her jealousy, not of her sister's power, but of her sister's stability. Namaka already had a kingdom. The ocean accepted her without resistance. Pele had to fight for every inch of ground. And still, she moved forward. She crossed the sea again and again, chased by waves, hunted by storms, carrying her fire across the dark. What humans would later call volcanoes are the scars of this journey, places where Pele tried to stay and was forced to flee. And then at last, she reached Hawaii, the youngest island, the strongest spine of the stone. Here, the earth did not break beneath her. It answered. Pele dug deep, deeper than she ever had before. She struck the mantle of the world itself, tapping into the planet's heart. Fire surged upward and stayed. Namaka became, again, furious. Waves slammed against the stone. Storms tore at the land, but this time the land endured. Fire and water clashed, not to destroy each other, but to define their boundaries. And Pele remained. She claimed the volcano as her body and the island as her spine. She did not rule from the sea or the sky. She ruled from beneath. The people felt her presence in trembling ground, in glowing rivers of lava, in the fertile soil that followed destruction. Pele was not cruel, but she was emotional. She loved fiercely. And when she loved, she gave warmth, growth, and abundance. Forests returned when the lava had cooled. Life sprang that appeared to be dead. The people learned to honor her, to respect her fire, to speak her name with care. Because Pele was also jealous. When she was disrespected, when love was betrayed, when humans forgot the land was alive, her anger rose. Lava flowed without mercy, villages vanished beneath molten stone. It was not punishment, it was correction. Pele did not destroy out of hatred. She destroyed because stagnation is a lie. Fire clears what no longer serves, and creation requires sacrifice. Namaka watched from the deep, no longer chasing her sister, but never forgiving her. The ocean still presses against the land, testing it, reminding Pele that nothing remains unchallenged forever. They are still bound. Fire rises, water answers. The world is shaped between them. Even now, Pele sleeps beneath the islands. Not gone, not silent, but waiting. Because fire never truly rests. Yemoja, mother of waters. Before cities learned to stand, before borders were drawn and defended, before names were carved in the stone and called eternal, there was water. And before water had a name, there was Yemoja. She was not born of the world. The world was shaped around her. From her body flowed rivers. From her breath came tides. From her depth came the rhythm that taught life how to move. The first people did not veer near water by accident. They gathered where she rested. They drank from her hands. They bathed their newborns in her blessing. They buried their dead where the currents would carry the memories away. They knew what water meant. They called her mother, not just because she was gentle, but because she endured. Yemoja carried life the way oceans carry storms, patiently, heavily, without asking for praise. She fed the fish. She cooled the land. She taught women how to give birth. And she taught men how fragile survival truly was. Water was the first cradle, and their people remembered that. At first, they sang to the rivers. They left offerings at the shores, and they spoke her name before crossing dangerous waters, and thanked her when they returned alive. They knew waters were something very sacred. They knew some depths were not meant to be entered. And that balance was not written in the books back then. It was felt. It was carried in the people, on their tongues and in their hearts, but most assuredly in their memories. And that, unfortunately, was the flaw, because memories faded faster than the rivers flow. And over time, these villages, well, they grew into towns. And towns gave way to much larger cities. And it was in the cities that men grew bold, and the cities themselves became that which was worshipped. Stone replaced reverence. Walls replaced gratitude. Water became something to be controlled, not to be honored. They cut into her veins to redirect rivers. They poisoned her depth and called it progress. They took from her endlessly, then blamed her when the waters changed. Then they stopped asking. They stopped listening. They forgot that the same force that nourishes also remembers. And most of all, Yemoja felt it. Every child who was lost to greed, every shoreline that was scarred, every offering replaced instead by arrogance, her grief did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated. It settled into her depths like pressure, like memory, like sorrow with nowhere left to go. And when the balance finally broke, when the talking outweighed the giving, Yemoja wept. Her tears did not fall gently. They became rivers that no longer obeyed banks. They became rains that did not stop even when begged. They became tides that erased borders drawn by men who believed that land was permanent. Villages vanished first, and then the great arrogant cities. Streets became canals. Temples sank. Names dissolved into silt. Civilizations that believed themselves chosen were swallowed by ceremony. No armies could ever march against her. No wall ever argued successfully with the sea, because water does not negotiate. Water reclaims. And still, Umoja was not cruel. She was precise. To those who honored life, she was protection, a guiding current, a warm ripple in the soft waters, a safe passage to the home that was always there to greet you. To those who exploited, polluted, and dominate, she represented correction, not vengeance, but correction, a gentle teaching of the right order of things. Because water cleanses, and water remembers better than anything else. Water waits longer than any angry child ever could. Every river still remembers where it came from. Every body is still mostly water, and every death still returns to her. She is the womb that gives life. She is the grave that receives it back. And when the world forgets us again, as it always does, when the cities with their arrogance and convenience rise too high, when the arrogance grows heavier than wisdom, when humanity mistakes dominance for balance, Umoja will rise again. Not in rage, not in hatred, but in inevitability. Because water does not hate, it simply remembers. And the thing it remembers most is how to come home. The Shape of Death, a myth reading. Before death had a name, it had no face. There was no figure waiting in the dark, no voice calling from beyond, no blade raised in judgment. There was only absence. The earliest humans did not imagine death as an enemy. They experienced it as an event, as a sudden cold, as inevitable as night. A body stopped moving. A fire went out. A voice was never heard again. Death did not arrive, it happened. And because it had no intention, it inspired no image. As civilizations formed, something changed. When humans learned to build cities, they also learned to remember. And memory demanded explanation. If life had meaning, then its ending had to as well. So death became a place before it became a person, a realm, a crossing, a river, a shadowed road. In many early traditions, death was gentle, not merciful, but calm. It came like sleep. It came like dusk. The dead were not punished, they were processed, guided, measured, prepared. Death was not here to hurt you, it was there to receive you. But the world grew crowded. Empires expanded, wars multiplied, famine followed power wherever it went. And death stopped feeling distant. It moved into homes, into streets, into churches. When people began dying by the thousands, death could no longer be abstract. It needed a face. The turning point came when death became visible, not as a myth, but a spectacle. Plague emptied cities. Fields filled with bodies instead of crops. Entire generations vanished between seasons. And suddenly, death was no longer rare. It was constant. When something becomes constant, humans stop asking if and start asking when. And when fear demands explanation, authority provides answers. This is when death learned to judge. The end of life was no longer neutral. It was deserved. It was earned, avoided if you obeyed. The dead were no longer simply gone, they were sorted. saved or condemned, accepted or judged, and judgment requires a judge. So humanity dressed death, not in flesh but in symbol, a skeleton, because beneath every difference all humans look the same. A robe, because authority hides itself, because power never shows its hand. And a blade, not a sword of war but a tool of harvest, the scythe, because death does not fight you, it collects you. The Grim Reaper did not appear all at once. It assembled, piece by piece, century by century. Artists painted what people feared. Priests preached what people needed to hear. And death stepped forward, not as an idea, but as a presence. Tall, silent, watching. It did not rage, it did not plead, it waited. And this figure was not born from ancient scripture. It was born from trauma, from watching neighbors vanish overnight, from mass graveyards blessed in a hurry, from doorbells ringing so often they lost meaning. The Grim Reaper is not death itself. It is humanity's attempt to look death in the eye. And once death had a face, it could be spoken to, appealed to, mocked, or feared. Stories emerged of death being tricked, outrun, delayed. Not because humans believed they could win, but because they needed to imagine resistance. Even in myth, death always wins, but sometimes it listens. As centuries passed, the Grim Reaper followed humanity forward, into books, into theater, into art, then into films, then into comics, then into jokes. Because when something terrifies you long enough, eventually you laugh. Not because it is funny, but because laughter is control. Thoth, god of cosmic structure, language, and recorded reality. Thoth is not a god who rules through force. He does not conquer, he does not command armies, he does not demand worship through fear. Thoth governs something far more dangerous. He governs understanding. In Kemetic thought, the universe does not function because it's powerful. It functions because it is ordered, because it can be measured, because it can be named, because it can be remembered. And Thoth is the intelligence that makes that possible. Now, Thoth is known by many names, each reflecting a different aspect of his function. In Kemet, he is Jehudi, a name tied to intelligence, speech, and precision. He is called Lord of Divine Words, he who reckons time, and scribe of the gods. To the Greeks, he becomes Hermes, and later Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great mind. In esoteric traditions, he is not treated as a personality at all, but as a principle of intelligence. Sometimes he appears with the head of an ibis bird, sometimes as a baboon. These are not aesthetic choices. The ibis represents calculation, balance, and precision. The baboon represents observation, memory, and lunar rhythm. Thoth's forms are not symbolic masks, they are functional avatars. Now, this is what Thoth actually governs. Thoth does not create the universe. He does not destroy it. He does not rule it. He makes it legible. Thoth governs language as a creative force, writing as memory made permanent, mathematics as cosmic truth, time as a measurable system, law as recorded balance. In Kemetic cosmology, chaos is not defeated by violence, it is stabilized by Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance. And Thoth is Ma'at's recorder. He does not decide what is true, he ensures that truth is accurately accounted for, and that distinction matters. Thoth and the structure of reality. In myth, Thoth is often present during moments of dispute among gods. When Horus and Set battle for kingship, Thoth mediates. When divine law must be clarified, Thoth records. When order must be restored, Thoth calculates. He is not neutral because he is indifferent. He is neutral because structure must be impartial. Reality does not care who you are, only whether balance is maintained. Thoth embodies that principle. Now, the weighing of the heart ceremony. One of Thoth's most important roles appears in the judgment of the dead. When a soul enters the hall of Ma'at, the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. Anubis conducts the ritual. Osiris presides, but Thoth records the outcome. He does not judge the soul, he does not punish it, he does not save it. He ensures the process is correct. In this moment, Thoth represents the idea that justice is not emotional, it is procedural. Cosmic awareness is not mercy or cruelty, it is accuracy. Language is power. Now, to understand Thoth, we must understand how ancient cultures viewed language. Words were not labels, they were forces. To know the true name of a thing was to have power over it. To write something was to make it real beyond the moment. Thoth is the god of that threshold. Speech becomes spell. Writing becomes law. Memory becomes continuity. This is why Thoth is associated with magic, not illusion, but as applied knowledge. Magic is simply understanding reality well enough to manipulate it. And his influence beyond Kemet. Thoth does not remain confined to Kemet. Through cultural contact, he becomes Hermes. Through Hermeticism, he becomes the universal mind. Through alchemy, he becomes the architect of transformation. Through philosophy, he becomes intellect itself. By the time he appears as Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth is no longer just a god. He is the idea that consciousness can understand the universe it inhabits, and that idea survives every empire. The Book of Thoth. Now, Thoth's most famous relic is not a weapon or a crown. It is fittingly a book. And the Book of Thoth represents total knowledge, language that can command nature, words that can bend reality. Myth warns that those who read it without wisdom lose themselves, not because knowledge is evil, but because unprepared awareness destabilizes identity. This is a recurring pattern in Thoth mythology. Knowledge is dangerous, but power without structure destroys the holder. This is why Thoth is not a king. Thoth never rules a kingdom. This is not an omission, it is a statement. Kings come and go. Structures remain. Thoth does not sit on a throne because reality itself sits on his function. Empires collapse, languages die, but mathematics persist. Law persists. Memory persists. And thus, so does Thoth. In modern thinking, Thoth appears as the architect of intellect, the symbol of recorded reality, the reminder that understanding carries responsibility. He is not faith, he is not belief, he is the mechanism between both. Thoth does not ask to be worshipped, he asks only to be understood. He stands where knowledge becomes permanent, where speech shapes reality, where truth is measured instead of declared. As long as humans seek to understand the universe rather than to dominate it, Thoth remains present, not as a ruler, but as the mind that keeps the universe legible. Tiamat, the first mother of monsters. Before there were gods with names, before temples, before prayers, before fear knew how to kneel, there was Tiamat. Not born, not created, not crowned. She was. She was the saltwater ocean before shorelines existed, the dark womb before light learned how to speak, the roar beneath creation, where nothing had yet decided what it wanted to be. Tiamat was not evil. She was not kind. She was unfiltered existence. In the beginning, there was only mingling. Fresh water and salt. Apsu and Tiamat. Stillness and motion folding into one another. From this union came the younger gods. Loud, restless, impatient. They shouted inside the silence. They stirred the waters. They forgot that they were guests inside a body older than time. And the old gods began to ache. Apsu wanted silence back. He planned destruction not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. The young gods killed him first. They struck the quiet father down, and the waters trembled. Tiamat felt it, not as grief alone, but as betrayal. Creation had turned on its source. Something ancient woke up in her depths. Not rage, not vengeance. Correction. The sea does not scream when it floods a city. It simply returns things to where they belong. Tiamat did not declare war. She responded. She gave birth again. This time, not to gods who would forget her. This time, she birthed monsters. Serpents with venom instead of prayers. Dragons with eyes like eclipses. Creatures shaped by fear itself. Not because she loved chaos, but because chaos was truth before order learned how to lie. A consort forged for war, and the heavens shook. The younger gods panicked. They had learned how to rule, but not how to face their mother. They searched for a weapon. They searched for a hero. They chose Marduk. Not because he was the oldest, not because he was the wisest, but because he promised control. Marduk did not face Tiamat as a son. He faced her as a system. He brought nets to trap the infinite winds, to suffocate the ocean. Words to define what should never have been named. And when he struck her down, creation didn't cheer, it split. From her body, the world was built. Her ribs became the sky. Her blood became the rivers. Her bones became the foundation of order. Civilization rose on a corpse, and all the gods called it victory. But listen closely. Chaos was never destroyed. It was never dissected. Tiamat did not vanish. She was repurposed. Every storm that ignores your prayers, every flood that erases borders, every moment where systems collapse under their own arrogance, that is her breath moving through the cracks. Tiamat is not a villain. She is the reminder that order is temporary, that control is borrowed, that creation always comes from something older, darker, and deeper than comfort allows. She is the mother civilization buried alive, and she is still dreaming. The gods fear chaos because it reminds them of what they were before they learned how to rule, that they were simply aspects of the universe, no greater or lesser than any other creation. Wadjet, the flame on the brow of kings. Before crowns were forged, before thrones were carved from stone, before kings learned how to speak like gods, power already had a guardian. In the marshlands of the Delta, where water hides its depth and reed whispers secrets older than language, Wadjet watched. She did not rule a city. She did not demand temples. She did not walk among the people. She waited. The gods knew chaos does not always arrive as war. Sometimes it comes as doubt, sometimes as betrayal, sometimes as a ruler who forgets why he was chosen. And when the world needed authority that could not be questioned, they did not send a storm, they did not send an army, they sent a warning. From the papyrus marsh the cobra rose, not to strike, but to be seen. Wadjet coiled herself into fire and gold, her body becoming the living sigil of sovereignty. She climbed the crown of the king, not as decoration, but as a contract. Rule in balance, she whispered, without sound or burn. From that day forward, no true king stood alone. When enemies crept through shadows, Wadjet's eyes opened. When traitors smiled too easily, her hood flared. When foreign kings tested the borders of Kemet, they felt heat on their faces before steel ever touched their skin. She did not chase invaders across deserts. She did not roar like Sekhmet. She did not judge like Anubis. She simply ended threats. Quickly, precisely, without ceremony. Pharaohs learned this truth early. The crown was not theirs. The throne was not theirs. Even the land was borrowed. What belonged to them was the responsibility of being worthy of the cobra. For when a ruler spoke falsely, Wadjet tightened. When the ruler ruled for himself, she leaned forward. And when a ruler forgot Ma'at entirely, forgot balance, forgot duty, forgot the people, the flame on the brow burned hot enough to be the last thing his enemies never saw. Thus Wadjet endured, not in stories told to children, but in silent warnings to kings, not as a goddess who walked the earth, but as a presence that ended reigns. Even now, long after crowns have turned dust, her symbol remains, a reminder. Power is never safe, authority is never passive, and true sovereignty always comes with a blade already drawn. Wadjet still watches, and she never misses. Melina, the Inuit sun goddess who refused to be caught. Now, the Arctic is not empty. It only looks empty to people who've never had to survive in a world where the sky can erase you. Up here, silence is language, wind is warning, and light is not decoration. Light is a verdict. Because in the far north, the sun doesn't simply rise, it returns, like something that had left on purpose, like someone who remembers why they ran. And her name, whispered through the ice, through stories, through generations, is Melina, the Inuit sun goddess, North America's burning eye. So picture this, a tundra horizon so wide it feels like the edge of the world. Snow drifts like plain dunes, dark rock teeth jut from the land, and above it all, a sky that doesn't behave like other skies. A sky where the sun can refuse to set, or disappear for weeks. A sky that makes time feel like an animal, restless, hungry, unpredictable. In that world, you don't worship the sun because it's pretty, you respect it because it decides if you live. And Melina is that decision. Melina, the woman who became daylight. Melina isn't portrayed as a distant glowing ball. She is a woman, a being with presence, with hair like night wind, with skin kissed by cold and sun alike, with eyes that carry the weight of the horizon. She wears the Arctic the way royalty wears a crown, not for fashion, but for survival. And around her, whether you imagine her in traditional adornments or in mythic cinematic armor made of hide, bone, and sunlight, there is always the same feeling. She is not gentle. She is not the soft warmth of spring morning. She is the harsh truth of daylight. The kind that exposes tracks in snow. The kind that reveals what someone tried to hide. The kind that turns secrets in the shadows that have nowhere to go. The beginning. Before the sky, there was a house. In one of the most famous Inuit tellings, Melina begins not in the heavens, but on earth. She lived with her brother. His name was Ananigan, often described as the moon. And in some versions, another sister exists too, a presence in the household, another point on the triangle of family and fate. But the core is always the same. Melina is there. Ananga is there. A home exists. And like many mythic homes, it is not safe because it has walls. Sometimes the first danger in a mythology is not the monster outside, it is the betrayal inside. The violation when trust breaks. There is a night, and the night is thick. No stars you can count, no lamp strong enough to banish what's about to happen. Melina's brother violates her, and in some telling, she comes into her darkness and does not know who until the truth is uncovered. And when the truth becomes clear, when the betrayal reveals its face, something fundamental snaps. Not just in Melina, in the world. Because in the Inuit myth, the cosmos isn't mechanical, it's emotional, a moral universe, a relationship universe. And when an act like that happens, the world does not shrug and move on. It transforms. The torch. Flight becomes fire. Melina does not stay. She takes a torch, a fire in hand, and she runs. Not into the woods, not into another village. She runs into the sky. And as she rises, her torch becomes brighter, hotter, purer, until it is no longer just a fire. It is the sun itself. And it is the first blazing refusal, the first celestial no. And behind her, a Ningen follows. He is frantic, hungry, ashamed, possessed by pursuit. He grabs his own flame, and his light becomes the moon, not as radiant, not as triumphant, a lesser fire, a chasing fire. The chase, why the sun and the moon move. Now the sky makes sense, not because science is wrong, but because the myth is describing something else. Not the physics of motion, but the meaning of motion. The sun and the moon cross the heavens, not as random objects, but as story. Melina runs ahead, unreachable, sovereign, burning. Anangan follows, always behind, never arriving. And in many tales, the moon grows thin, weak, diminished, because he forgets to eat, because obsession is a kind of starvation. That is why the moon waxes and wanes. Sometimes he regains strength, sometimes he fades, but he never stops chasing. And Melina never stops moving, because the first rule of her myth is she will not be caught again. The Arctic miracle, when day doesn't end. And here's where the Inuit sky becomes legend, because in the far north, the sun can hang above the horizon for days, weeks, months, a long golden endurance, a daylight that refuses to die. This is not a cute fun fact, this is Melina's personality written across the atmosphere. When Melina decides to stay, she stays. When she leaves completely. And then she returns. You feel it in your bone, because for the communities living in the Arctic, the returning sun is not just nice weather. It is spiritual event. It is cosmic reunion, a promise that the world hasn't abandoned you. Melina's power, light as witness. But here's the thing most people miss about Melina. Her power isn't just heat, it's exposure. Light reveals, light tracks movement, light turns footprints into evidence. Light makes the hunter visible, light makes the hunted see the land. Melina becomes the witness of the sky. And here's the harsh truth to that. Because of her story, the sun isn't a smiling mother. It's a survivor, a living boundary, a force that says, I will not disappear for your comfort. I will not soften the truth. I will shine until you can't pretend anymore. The cosmic archetype, the solar feminine who escapes. A lot of cultures imagine the sun as male, a king, a warrior, a father, a creator seated on a throne of fire. But Melina is a different archetype. She is the solar feminine as escape and sovereignty. She is the feminine divinity, not defined by who she belongs to, but who she refuses. She is a goddess who doesn't negotiate with violation. She doesn't argue, she doesn't plead, she moves. And in moving, she becomes untouchable. In moving, she becomes the sky's dominant rhythm. Now, imagine Melina as she would appear in the cinematic myth. She walks across a bridge of snow and ice. Behind her, the sun blooms like a halo, too bright to stare at. Wind pulls her hair like black smoke. Her silhouette is sharp against the gold. She doesn't smile as a friendly deity, but she moves forward, always forward. Each step is a reminder that this is a goddess not begging for worship. This is a goddess whose existence is proof of survival. So when the sun stretches over the Arctic, when it refuses to set, when it stares down at the frozen land like an unblinking eye, remember this: it is not just daytime, it is Melina, still running, still sovereign, still refusing to be caught. And in the world where people have tried to rewrite what happened, erase what happened, hide what happened, Melina becomes something sacred, a light that will not let the story disappear, because her myth teaches a hard truth carved in the sky. Sometimes the only way to survive is to become untouchable. Sometimes the only way forward is to turn your escape into a new cosmos. And the sun is not always kindness. Sometimes the sun is a woman with a torch and a vow. Echidna, the cosmic mother of monsters. Now, Echidna is not called herself a monster, but she is the mother of them. Her name in Greek means viper, Echidna, and this word carries venom. It is ancient, coiled, and is patient. She does not belong to the generation of Olympian gods. She does not sit in marble halls. She does not command lightning or law. She belongs to something much older. Now, most traditions name her as the daughter of Phorcyrus and Ceto, ancient sea deities, beings well formed in the earliest layers of mythic existence. And other traditions go deeper still. They claim she was born of Gaia, the earth itself, and Tartarus, the abyss beneath the foundations. And if that lineage is accepted, then Echidna is not simply born into the world, she emerges from its structure. She is earth and depth combined. She is soil and void. She is surface and underworld. And her form reflects that duality. From the waist up, she is woman, beautiful, aware, composed. From the waist down, she is serpent, scaled, coiled, eternal. And this is not a curse. It is a declaration. The upper form represents consciousness. The lower form represents instinct. The serpent is older than temples, older than kings, older than writing itself. And across cultures, the serpent represents regeneration, tonic power, and the pulse of life that moves beneath the visible world. Echidna is not stitched together from parts. She is a whole. She is the seam between civilization and wilderness. She dwells in a cave, far from cities, far from Olympus. Ancient sources place her in the wild regions of Scylla. She does not seek attention. She does not seek conquest. She inhabits the margins, and from the margins she births power. Her giant, the great storm giant who once rose against Zeus. Typhon embodies violent chaos, wind, fire, upheaval. Echidna embodies generative chaos. Together they form a bloodline that predates order and survives beyond it. They do not seek to rule Olympus. They produce what challenges it. This is where Echidna reveals her true cosmic role. She is called the mother of monsters, but that phrase is much smaller than her actual being. She birthed Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld gates. She births the Hydra, the regenerative serpent that multiplies when wounded. She birthed the Chimera, the fusion of lion, goat, and serpent, a living contradiction of categories. She birthed Ortherus, the twin-headed guardian beast. In some traditions, she births the Sphinx, the riddle keeper who tests gods. These are not mindless horrors. They are thresholds. They stand at borders. They guard gateways. They demand transformation. Each one of her children forces confrontation. Each one requires growth. Each one stands between humanity and its next stage. Echidna does not birth destruction without design. She births resistance. Without resistance, there is no evolution. Without danger, there is no courage. Without monsters, there is no hero. Her existence reveals a deeper mythic law. The universe does not grow through comfort, it grows through tension. Echidna is the womb of that tension. She is primordial earth, refusing to be domesticated. She is chaos bloodline woven into the fabric of reality. Even the Olympians cannot erase her impact. Now, some later traditions claim she was slain by Argus Pantopus, the many-eyed giant servant of Hera, while she slept. Now, symbolically, this represents surveillance, destroying wild fertility, order suppressing the abyss. Yet, even in that version, her offspring remain. Her legacy persists. Her bloodline continues. You cannot eliminate the mother principle of resistance. You can only attempt to manage its expression. Echidna represents the archetype of the Dark Mother. Not evil, not malicious, but always necessary. The Dark Mother births the forces that compel transformation. She ensures that stagnation is impossible. She ensures that power must justify itself. She ensures that every kingdom must confront what it fears. Civilization defines itself by the monsters it overcomes, but someone must give birth to those monsters. That someone is Echidna. She is not chaos in motion, she is chaos as inheritance. She is the reminder that beneath every structure lies something older, something coiled, something fertile, something waiting. Echidna is not a footnote in heroic myth. She is the hidden foundation. Primordial earth, chaos bloodline, mother of thresholds. And without her, there would be no trials, no transformation, and no legends at all. Angrboða, the grief bringer. In Norse cosmology, the end of the gods has a mother, and her name is Angrboða. She does not rule a hall in Asgard. She does not sit among the Aesir. She doesn't even shout across battlefields. She simply stands in Ironwood, and from her comes Ragnarök. In Jotunheim, far from the ordered halls of Asgard, stood a region known as Ironwood, a place of shadow, prophecy, and old power. There lived Angrboða, a Jotun, not a goddess of Asgard, not a servant, not subordinate, but a being of primordial force. Her name means she who brings grief. And in Norse myth, names are not simply decorative. They are destiny. She is not introduced with fanfare, no feast hall, no divine spotlight. She exists in the margins. And the margins is where fate is born. The union of chaos. Into Ironwood comes Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the fracture in divine order. What happens between Loki and Angrboða is not a romance mythology. This is alignment. This is chaos meeting inevitability. From this first union are born three beings who would define the end of the gods. Fenrir, the wolf who would devour Odin. Jormungandr, the serpent who will poison the skies battling Thor. And Hel, the sovereign of the dishonored dead. Now understand the weight of this. From her, she births the end of Odin, the death of Thor, and the ruler of the underworld. This is not coincidence. This is structural myth design. The mother of Ragnarök. The gods discover these children, and they panic. Fenrir is chained. Jormungand is cast into the sea. Hel is sent to rule the dead. The Aesir try to contain the future, but Angrboða, she is not slain, she is not imprisoned, she is not even punished. She remains in Ironwood, just watching. There is something chilling about that. The father is bound in chains after his crime. The children are exiled, but the mother, untouched. because she represents something older than the Aesir. She is not rebellion, she is consequence. The shadow feminine. Angrboda does not swing a hammer like Thor. She does not sit on a throne like Odin, and she does not boast like Freya, but she births inevitability. In mythic structure, she represents the womb of catastrophe, the feminine aspect of fate, the quiet architect of endings, and the shadow mother archetype. She is the inversion of the nurturing goddess, not because she is evil, but because she gives birth to what must happen. In Norse cosmology, even the gods cannot escape fate, and Angrboda is one of fate's instruments. Why she matters. Without Angrboda, there is no Fenrir. There is no world serpent. There is no hell. There is no Ragnarök as we know it. She does not dominate the text, but she dominates the outcome. And that's the myth at its sharpest. The loudest characters are rarely the most powerful. Sometimes the one who stands in the forest is the one who changes the mythic world.
Njord, chronological archive myth entry. Njord, pronounced Njord, is a Norse sea god associated with wind, maritime wealth, and safe passage. His mythology reflects both ancient fertility traditions and the later Viking Age expansion culture of Scandinavia. The earliest possible roots of Njord may reach back before the 1st century Common Era. In 98 Common Era, the Roman historian Tacitus recorded the worship of a Germanic earth goddess named Nerthus in his work Germania. Many scholars believe Njord may be connected to this earlier deity. Linguistically, their names are related. Some researchers suggest that Njord may represent a later masculine development of an older fertility god or goddess within early Germanic religion. In mythic time, Njord belongs to the Vani, a group of gods associated with fertility, prosperity, and natural cycles. At some point in divine history, war breaks out between the Vani and the Aesir, the warrior gods of Asgard. The conflict ends not in destruction, but in truce. As part of a peace exchange, Njord is sent to live among the Aesir. This event marks his integration into the dominant Norse divine order. From that point forward, he is recognized as a god of the sea, wind, and wealth. His role becomes essential in a culture dependent on ships and trade. Njord later marries the giantess Skadi. She chooses her husband by looking only at the feet of the gods, believing she is selecting the god Balder. Instead, she chooses Njord. They attempt to share their homes. 9 nights are spent by the sea, where Njord feels at peace but Skadi cannot rest. 9 nights are spent in the mountains, where Skadi thrives but Njord cannot endure the howling wolves and cold air. The marriage ends in separation, symbolizing the tension between sea and mountain, movement and stillness. Njord is also identified as the father of Freyr and Freyja, 2 of the most prominent deities in Norse mythology. Freyr governs harvest, kingship, and peace. Freyja governs love, magic, and receives half of the honored dead in her hall. Through them, Njord's influence extends into fertility, prosperity, and divine authority. During the Viking Age, approximately 800 Common Era to 1100 Common Era, Njord's importance would have been significant in maritime societies. Place names in Sweden and Norway suggest cultic reverence. Sailors and traders likely invoked his protection for safe voyages and favorable winds. After the Christianization of Scandinavia in the 11th century Common Era, active worship of Njord declined. His memory survives primarily through the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, recorded in the 13th century Common Era by the Icelandic historian Snorri Sturluson. Njord does not dominate the dramatic myths of destruction or prophecy. Instead, he represents continuity. He embodies wealth through movement, prosperity through trade, and stability through flow. In Norse cosmology, he is not the storm. He is the wind that fills the sail.
Adiriel, the fallen angel of divine physiology and cosmic awareness. In the celestial order, not all angels were created to sing. Some were created to understand. Adiriel belonged to this second lineage. Not a herald, not a throne guardian, not a voice in the endless choir. He was an observer. Among the earliest structures of the heavens, Adiriel was assigned a role few others could fulfill. He studied not the stars, but the framework that allowed stars to exist. Not worlds, but the architecture that held worlds together. He examined the mechanisms of consciousness, the relationship between awareness and form, the way divinity expressed itself through structure. Where other angels reflected glory, Adiriel examined design. Adiriel's form reflected his function. His physique was dense, deliberate, and stable. Strength without ornament, power without display. Each muscle existed with cohesion. Each wing functioned as an instrument of perception. To Adiriel, the body was not a vessel. It was a language, a system through which intelligence moved. Over time, Adiriel reached a realization that would later be called dangerous. That awareness does not descend through command, it emerges through comprehension. That obedience deserves order, but understanding transforms it. This distinction marked the beginning of his divergence. Adiriel did not rebel. He did not gather followers. He did not challenge authority. He asked questions. Why consciousness was restricted, why angels were forbidden to fully perceive themselves, why knowledge was segmented instead of integrated. In celestial hierarchy, curiosity was tolerated, completion was not. The moment of the fall did not arrive as a punishment, it arrived as awareness. Adiriel achieved full integration of his own structure. In understanding himself completely, he crossed a boundary that had never meant to be crossed. Not a boundary of space, a boundary of permission. When Adiriel fell, his wings did not burn. They remained intact. This alone set him apart from other fallen figures. His descent was not destruction, it was removal. He no longer fit within the limitations of the system that had created him. On the lower planes, Adiriel did not decay. His form stabilized. His awareness expanded. He perceived time not as a sequence, but as a layered presence. He perceived matter not as inert, but as responsive. He did not see himself as fallen. He saw himself as unbound. To humanity, Adariel would later appear as myth, a silent winged figure, powerful, observing, never ruling. He did not tempt, he did not command, he waited. Later traditions struggled to categorize him. Some called him dangerous, others called him corrupt, many called him prideful, and these labels served a purpose. They discouraged imitation, because Adariel represented a truth institutions could not allow, that awareness is not granted, it is developed. In mythic terms, Adariel occupies a liminal role, not a ruler, not a destroyer, not a savior. He is a threshold, the embodiment of the question, what happens when divine beings fully understand themselves? Adariel appears only to those already standing at the edge, to scholars who sense fractures in doctrines, to mystics who feel the limits of belief, to creators who recognize intelligence embedded in form. He does not teach, he clarifies. Adariel remains fallen only by definition. In function, he is something entirely different. A witness, a reminder, a warning that knowledge, once integrated, cannot be unlearned, and awareness, once achieved, changes alignment forever. Ogwi, Admiral of the Living Sea. Stand at the edge of the Atlantic long enough and you begin to understand something. The ocean is not empty. It moves with intention. It breathes with memory. It carries names that history tried to erase. Every tide pulls at something deeper than the shore. Within that vastness stands Ogwi. He is not the chaos of crashing waves, nor the reckless fury of the storm. He is the discipline within the tide, the command inside emotion, the authority that charts the horizon. Ogwi is admiral. His presence is not loud, but it is undeniable. His skin is imagined in deep maritime blue, not decorative sky blue, but the heavy blue found beneath the surface where the light begins to disappear. Blue that borders on black, blue that holds secrets. Against the depth, gold rests easy, chains like navigational lines, medallions like compass centers, adornments that echo anchors pulled from the seafloor. Water does not thrash against him, it parts. When he stands in waist-high surf, the waves bend around his frames. The tide slows in recognition. The current listens. His crown rises like coral and plume, red and gold, cutting against the ocean air. Not vanity, but rank. Not decoration, but office. He governs sea salt. He governs ships. He governs routes, and routes shape destiny. The sea has been commerce, invasion, escape, exile, return. It has carried explorers and conquerors, traders and captives, dreamers and displaced. Ogwi presides over every crossing. He is the keeper of the passage, the witness of migration, the silent authority over the line between homeland and horizon. For the African diaspora, the Atlantic is not just geography, it is archive, it is grave, it is womb, it is rupture and survival intertwined. Millions crossed unwillingly, millions never saw land again, millions endured and carried memory forward. Within voodoo cosmology, the sea is threshold, a place where worlds meet and spirits travel. Offerings to Ogwi are set afloat in small boats and released into the open water. They are not placed on altars inside walls. They are entrusted to distance. If the sea returns the offering, it was refused. If it carries it outward, it was accepted. Even in ritual, the message is clear. The ocean decides. Ogwi becomes more than a maritime spirit. He becomes the guardian of the scattered, protector of those who crossed and survived, keeper of those who did not. The Atlantic is not silent under his command, it remembers. Storms rise and some say it is random weather. Others whisper that the sea corrects itself, that it refutes certain weights, that it rejects certain chains. Agwe does not rage without purpose. He commands. In ceremony, when he mounts a devotee, the posture changes. The body straightens. Movements become precise, controlled, naval. This is dignity in the bearing, authority in the gesture. He may salute, he may demand water. He may move as though standing on the deck of a ship no one else can see. His authority is not theatrical, it is discipline. He is often paired with La Sarine, the mermaid of death and longing. If she is the song that draws you to the sea, he is the structure that governs its currents. If she is seduction and emotion, he is sovereignty and protection. Together they embody the emotional and commanding halves of the sea, call and command, longing and law. Agwe's roots reach beyond the Caribbean. His essence echoes older West and Central African water traditions, river spirits, deep water guardians, forces of crossing and return. He carries ancestral continuity across oceans. Water was humanity's first mirror, its first road, its first boundary. Agwe stands within that paradox. He is not the wave that crashes for spectacle, he is the tide that endures. For a people dispersed by water, he represents strength without cruelty, authority without oppression, protection without noise. He does not shout across the sea. He stands within it, steady, unmovable, commanding routes no empire could fully control. The ocean still moves, ships still cross, and beneath every horizon line, the admiral watches. Akasha of Kemet, the queen who did not die. Now this story takes place in ancient Kemet, in an age before history had hardened to dates. An age where empires were still learning what they were, learning their power. Kemet was rising, pulling itself away from the older, darker traditions, blood rites, ancestral consumption, magic fed by death rather than memory. At the heart of this transformation stood a woman from beyond its borders, Akasha. She was not born of Kemet. She came from the lands of Sumer, Mesopotamia, where the first cities were built, where queens were not ornaments but institutions themselves. When she was wed to Enlil, the king of Kemet, the marriage was political, but the power she brought was real. Akasha did not rule from behind the throne. She was the throne's spine. Known as the queen of beauty and order, Akasha was spoken of as a devastating beauty, not a fragile beauty, not a decorative beauty, but a regal beauty. Her skin was dark and luminous, kissed by the sun of the south. Her body bore the symmetry of deliberate design. Her hair was worn in intricate braids, woven with gold, beads, and ritual markings, each braid a language of status, lineage, and intent. When she walked, people noticed. When she spoke, people listened. And when she ruled, things changed. Under Akasha and Enlil, Kemet began to cleanse itself. Cannibalism was outlawed. Blood sorcery was dismantled. The old shadow priesthoods were dragged into the light. And civilization makes enemies along its way. Enter the witch sisters. Among those enemies were two ancient sisters, Maharet and